I want to thank everybody for joining us at Erie Arts and Culture this evening for the next session of our Pro Network webinars. The Pro Network is sponsored in part by the National Endowments for the Arts through their Artworks program. This evening we are joined by Gamar Markarin. Gamar is an American Lebanese designer, urbanist, and systems thinker interested in media and communication. She received her BS in landscape architecture from Lebanese University in Beirut in 2006, MS in Design and Urban Ecologies from Parsons, the New School in 2016, and she's a graduate, has a graduate certification in documentary filmmaking from the School of Public Engagement at the New School in 2018. In 2007, Gamar co-founded Atelier Hamra, a landscape architecture office in Beirut, operating in Lebanon and the MENA region. Currently living between New York and Philadelphia, Gamar collaborates with the Philadelphia Mural Arts Program as a design strategist, focusing on the design and implementation of playful, participatory research and design processes, as well as other independent design and production projects across both cities. Gamar, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Is everyone hearing me okay now?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for the introduction. Should I can share my screen and then do a little introduction there as well of the presentation, if that's okay. Let me open the presentation. Just whoa, there's something fishy. Format, view, present. Must be my internet. It's not cooperating today.
Do you want to try to email the presentation to me and I could screen share from my computer?
I can do that in parallel, but not, is it not working now?
I am not seeing it.
Okay, let me.
I see it now.
Yeah, okay, so view, present. It's just taking a tiny few seconds to load. Oish. Can you see it now again? Okay, so I just wanted to, so the title of the presentation is much more than a survey. As I was having a back and forth conversation with Patrick, we decided to, for me to share some of the projects that I've worked on, but through the perspective of the research methodologies and data collection, and then how I came to represent them in the context of the project. But first, I wanted to give you a little sort of a story behind why I went into this practice to begin with. In 2003, I was visiting New York City, and I by curiosity, I walked into the New School and I saw a brochure of the master's program that I eventually enrolled in. And it had this map on the brochure. And I was studying urban design back then, and it was so rigid in Lebanon, urban design. And we rarely talked about relationships within the urban ecosystem. We rarely talk about why things are the way they are. So I saw this map, even though I didn't understand it then, I thought it was very relational. It was messy. It looked like a diagram that was like a working diagram. It wasn't a finished one. So that's when I decided to join the Masters in Design and Urban Ecologies, because I knew that this was going to open my career to more sort of creative ways of understanding the world that we live in. So and I guess the reason we need more of methods that are more than a survey is because it is true that the survey gives a good understanding of what the participants within a project want or need, or what the issues are. But particularly when working, I guess, with communities, it's the qualitative research that counts most. So I guess throughout my career after my master's, I started experimenting with different methods of how we can get qualitative data to work with, and then how we can then represent it back to the participants that we work with and turn it into a tool that is as useful as a survey as well. So I was wondering, I know we have a few participants today, but I was wondering if you can think about one form of data collection or research that you would like to use in a project if you never had, but you didn't have the chance to do so because of, let's say, budget concerns or time or something like that. So if you would like to share with me one form of data collection or research that you really, really would like to use in a project but haven't had the chance to do so yet. I see focus group. Long-term study over years. Good, I'm sort of going to cover both topics. So feel free to add more, and I'll keep going with the methods. So today, what I want to share with you is, if my internet permits, some of the methodology that is within our project. We have icebreakers, gameplay and game design, context immersion, a lot of informal and formal interviews, data mining at some points, deep listening, visual storytelling, systems mapping, some surveys. I still like surveys, by the way. Storyboarding, filmmaking, photography, visioning sessions. So what I would like to do, let me see if there's any more ideas in the chat. Exciting about visual storytelling. Okay, great. Okay. So today I want to share 3 projects, one of which is mapping the potato supply and value chain in the Ecuadorian Sierra region. I'll give you the details in a sec. The design of Southwark Schoolyard, our park, which is with mural arts in South Philadelphia, and one site analysis exercise from a project that is still ongoing right now. So I just wanted to share just that particular exercise that we did with the children. So it's the children's perspectives through the camera lens. So if I want to go to the potato supply and value chain in the Ecuadorian Sierra, I did this project when I was writing my thesis during the master's. And this project was done over 9 months. And the reason I consider it a professional project is because we did have actual partners, including the Ministry of Culture in Ecuador, in Quito, an activist group called Red de Saberes, which means a network of knowledges, and the City Institute, which does a lot of research, urban research. So we were invited as a group or as a class to do research around a central popular market in Quito that sells produce, but also a lot of other things like technology and clothing, etc. So the idea was to try and understand what are the issues that the market is having, and how we can be of asset as a research team to that market. So at the end of the project, we visualized this systems map, which is the supply and value chain of the potato. you can see there's a lot of information here. So a lot of the methods that went into this visualization include, and I'll go into the details of this visualization in a bit. So what went into this was context immersion, obviously, a lot of informal and formal interviews, some data mining for the mapping exercises, a lot of deep listening, because if you want to immerse yourself in the context, you have to have deep listening skills as well, because especially in a popular market setting, a lot of people want to share their experiences, their day-to-day, their everydayness, what's happening, what are their struggles, etc. So it was important for us to just sit there and have deep listening skills. Obviously, the map offers visual storytelling. It is first and foremost a systems map. And throughout the project, we also did a lot of storyboarding and a short film, which I will share later. I guess in order to implement all of these methodologies, we've had to have a theoretical framework. So in order to create a complex systems map, my thesis partner, Tate, and I had to draw this diagram, because we had to situate the market, which is here at the center, almost at the center. And what were the relationships of the market to the lands, the productive lands in the mountain chains, but also what is the relationship of the market to the housing around the market itself, and what are the means of production and labor that sort of work around this market, that come in and out of the market, and what are the connections of the commodities and capital and value that comes out of these systems, and what are the relationships with the export and import economy in the country, and what external forces come into play. So I do not have the specifics of all the details, but what we did is we went to Ecuador. Obviously, we immersed ourselves in the context 4 times over the span of 9 months. We had informal and formal conversations about all of the subjects that came out into our in our theoretical framework, including housing conditions for the workers. Where does the produce come from? Who moves from territories from one to the other to bring in the produce? What are the different farmers that work in the field? So in order to understand that, we really decided to follow the potato. The potato was our guiding force. So what we did is we went there. We did a lot of interviews. So you see on this page that we have taken a lot of notes, technical notes, notes from our interviews, notes about the weather, the climate of where the potatoes grow. We also went to the fields and then literally followed the potato from the fields into the market. And then obviously we had a lot of conversations with the workers being mostly of indigenous people from the lands. And we really started understanding all the connections of labor and value that's being produced in the market, and how it's all connected to global economy, export, import, the economy of the potato itself, the potato chips, what are the internal migratory routes for the indigenous populations to be able to come in from the lands to the market to work, etc. So it was quite complex, and in order to actually understand this complexity and put it in a systems map, we really had to do a lot of the methods that I mentioned earlier. So you can see here, for example, starting from the farmer, how much money they put into the production of the potato, how much of that goes to the farmer being the indigenous workers, and then how that potato moves from across territories into the capital city, who's making the most profit out of it and why, and does this profit go back to the farmers or no? So all this was an exciting representation of everything everybody gave us as information. And in fact, at the end, it became a very, very powerful tool for the market to really talk about the different powers at play and why the market was in such dire conditions and in need of help from the government. So the Ministry of Culture used it many, many times as way of explaining the situation of why things are as they are in the market. And then the Quito City Institute as well. And what was most exciting for us is that Red de Saberes, the activist group who actually was also behind this project and was our partner, took this idea and took this systems thinking, if you may, and really drove its team to start thinking of different ways of telling the story of the market, because the story of the market was being told in a way that it was, it was dilapidating, it was really a hazard in the city, it was a space that was not wanted in the city, and it was under threat of displacement. So once we collectively came up with this narrative, it gave the market and the workers there a voice to tell really their story and how the value created in this system is never reinvested in their communities, be it in the lands that they own on the Ecuadorian Sierra, the mountains, nor in the living conditions around the market for the workers. So what we did also in parallel to tell the same story is, since we were following the potato, actually, we were taking a lot of photographs. We were documenting left and right. We kept a journal all the time. We kept recording all the conversations that we have. So when we had this rich visual data, we decided to, one, create the systems map to complexify the situation, but at the same time create a 15-minute film that tells the story, but in a very different way. So you can see here us cutting and pasting a lot of the interviews that we had transcribed, trying to put it in the form of a narrative and a storyboard. And then we turned that storyboard into the actual film, where you have snippets of what the issues are in the market, and then how we paralleled it with capitalist systems like supermarkets, and how supermarkets are a threat to popular markets and to the population, and specifically to the indigenous population, and how that is a threat to also the loss of land in the mountains, in the name of, again, capitalist production and reproduction. So this was very briefly, I'm sorry, I know it is a very, it is complex, but I try to share with you the most important, let's say, research method and data collection methods that went into the work behind this. And I am very happy to say that we produced this in 2016, and the map, the systems map, is still being used in the city. And Luis Herrera, who had created the Red de Saberes activist group, is still producing films and narratives using the theoretical framework that we had all collectively come up with. So I'm happy to say that it has become a great activism tool for the folks working and living there. So the next project I wanted to share with you is the design of Southwark Schoolyard, entitled Our Park. This one's one of my favorites, and I also want to say that this work was done within Mural Arts, Restored Spaces Initiative within Mural Arts, which was founded by Shari Hirsch. Shari Hirsch, in fact, hired us, me and Mateo, my work partner, to come up with participatory research and design methods, particularly using games and gameplay, in order to collectively design the schoolyard of Southwark School, front and back schoolyards. So again, how did we get to this final product? The way we got to this product was using lot of icebreakers during community meetings because it was all about participatory design. We did gameplay, game design first, and then gameplay. Prior to us coming into the project, a group called Cohabitation Strategies had done the context immersion for over a year. And then they had produced a wonderful document describing the situation there. So that work was done for us prior to going into the project. So it was really great. In this case, we did a few surveys, we did mapping and visioning sessions. We did all these exercises for many reasons. We did them to collectively design the schoolyard, but at the same time to create a shared knowledge base altogether. Oops, what just happened? Did I lose the screen?
Yeah, I think we lost your screen share.
Let me get it back. Okay, so sorry about that. So oh, am I muted? No. Patrick, can you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so what I like about this project is we wanted to, again, design this in a very collaborative way, in a very participatory way, with the community around the school, with the parents, the students, the staff, the school leadership, and many of the organizations around the school. So prior to actually doing this mapping exercise, we had done a lot of small creative workshops to get to know the participants that we are working with, and to have, let's say, enough information to move forward with designing the game. Because we wanted to design a game with the pieces being inspired from the community. And I'll show you the game in a bit. But prior to the game, one of the exercises that I really wanted to share with you was doing this community mapping exercise, from which we wanted to emerge these sort of invisible connections that exist in South Philadelphia. And the reason we did this is because Southwark has a very diverse population as a school. It has, I believe, 18 different languages spoken there, and South Philadelphia has a very diverse also community in terms of where people come from. So when we went to the school, folks didn't necessarily talk to each other, not because they didn't want to be, but because there was this a language barrier. And also maybe the space didn't foster for that. So what we did is we created this exercise of community mapping. And it's inspired by Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities. But I won't get into the details. If anyone's interested, I can give you those details later. But what we did is we did 3 sort of layers of mapping connections. We first wanted to map the individual on the map, on the plan. We asked people to write their names on a tag and then put it where they live. And then once that exercise was done, we asked folks who knew each other to connect each other with one color, with a line, to connect their names with a line with one color. And then after that, we asked participants to choose the different spots that they like within their neighborhoods, be it for hangouts or restaurants that they really like, or corner stores or public spaces. So they also put those on the map. And then with a second color, they connected themselves to those places where they usually hang out. And really, it was a really nice aha moment for the folks there. They're looking at each other saying, oh, you also hang out there? I also hang out there. How come we haven't spoken before or connected before? So the third connection that we did on the map was with the third color was for each person to bring in their treasure. For us, the treasure means the skills that they have, and put it on a sticker again and post it next to their names, and then connect similar skill sets to each other. And then that's when a really nice conversation started about, oh, you also play the guitar, my son plays the guitars, or I would like my son to play the guitar, would you teach my son music, etc. So there was a really exciting conversation that happened from generating or actually doing this mapping exercise. And what was nice about this moment is most of the folks who came to this exercise really became the core group of people who constantly showed up to our meetings afterwards. And one of our next meetings was actually playing the game. Matteo is the one who's holding the pen on the map, so he's one of my partners at work. So Matteo and I designed a game. These are some of the pictures of the community members who kept coming to our meetings and became really the core group. Sometimes we were really happy. We had 30, 40 community members, especially in a setting where a lot of the parents work during the day, but they got very excited about the project. So what Matteo and I did for the game, and we knew that the intention was the game to design the schoolyard. So we said, okay, we have a lot of information that came out of our mapping, that came out of prior surveys that we had done, that came out from prior small exercises that we had done that I'm not necessarily sharing today, but because we don't have enough time. But we had collected a lot of stories prior to reaching to the phase of designing a game. So Matteo and I decided, okay, the intention is to design the schoolyard. Why don't we turn the schoolyard, the plan itself, into the game board? So we used sort of the Monopoly layout to lay this plan out. And you can see here, this is the backyard of the school. And there's this colorful line that goes around it, which is, I'll share in a second what the content of these rectangles are. And then as you can see, it has numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4 on all 4 corners of the map. And each group would stand at one corner or sit at one corner. And then the game begins. So you throw dice. The number 1 group starts. You throw dice, and let's say you got 5 on the dice. So you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you land on a green spot. When you land on a green spot, it means you pick a card that talks about softscape. And then for whoever has played Cards Against Humanities, we got inspired by that. And then the format, we got inspired by the format, not the content. So for example, if I'm a group member from team number 1, I pick out the card and I read out loud, the row of blank hides the parking lot. Students love it. So the other team members have to use their answer cards. Again, just like Cards Against Humanity. Again, they have to use their answer cards to fill in this blank. After choosing their answer cards, that moment was very exciting for us because there was a lot of negotiation happening around the table. Each team 1, let's say, had 5 participants, team 2 had 6 participants, etc. So we played this 11 times with kids, with parents, with communities around the school, and for folks to be able to choose their answer cards was really, really an exciting sort of a site of negotiation amongst the team members. And then once the answer was chosen, the answers are given back to the team number 1, and team number 1 reads the statement again out loud and then inserting each answer. And then team number 1 had to renegotiate amongst themselves to pick the best answer. And once the best answer is picked, they had the challenge of positioning that the chosen card on the plan of the schoolyard. So let's say if they chose, the answer is a row of prune trees, let's say. Where does that row of prune trees go on the map? Is it best positioned here because the parking is in the back? Is it best positioned here? And so on and so forth. So there was layers and layers of negotiation happening, and then design. But what was fascinating to me is that I don't think anyone knew that they were designing. So as we played the game, the plan got populated a lot. And at the end of every game, Matteo and I took a snapshot. And then we had 11, 12 outcomes of the game. And then we went back to our office, and then we overlapped all these answers. And wherever we had overlap of similar ideas, we turned that into the plan, the design plan. And parallel to the game, we had a little survey on the wall as well for whoever walked in, let's say, late to the conversation or to the game. They would have the ability to also contribute by having similar blank statements here in many different languages, of course. And then instead of using words in this case, they use little icons that represent what could be filled in this gap, for example. Here it says, for example, I would love to have a blank in the schoolyard for an after-school activity. And I see here that there are sports icons and swings and a lot of like play equipment, so on and so forth. So having gathered all this information, we went back to the office, as I said, and overlapped all this information and translated it into something that's more spatial. But that wasn't the end of it, because what we really wanted to do is to give the project or the schoolyard or the design a solid vision or a concept. So what actually Shari introduced to me and Matteo is this idea of doing a community visioning session that we had not done before. And the idea is to help participants really how do you say, I'm sorry, sometimes I lose my English because it's not my first language, to put words, I guess, to the vision, to their vision, or the vision of what they want to see in the schoolyard. So we took that and we decided to introduce something called Postcards from the Future. Postcards from the Future is also an exercise that helps really imagine what people want to bring into the space. So what Matteo did is he designed this really old looking postcard, but it's actually in fact a postcard from the future with lush landscapes grown in front of the school, because prior to doing this project there was nothing but asphalt. So it was sort of eliciting people's imaginations of what the school could look like. But once you would turn around the postcard, you would see you would have the opportunity to put your name and what is the treasure that you brought into the space. And by treasure, we mean the different skills that people could bring into the space and into the growth of the space. And what is the dream for the Southwark Schoolyard? So it put the people in the mindset of them being, let's say, 20 years from now, writing to themselves or to their sons and daughters, what the space looks like now. And it was really exciting for a lot of them because it really, it's different than saying, oh, what it is that you want in the space. It sort of puts them in that context, right? A context of imagination and envisioning. And it was really exciting because there was a lot of, let's say, consistency with what the folks in the school were envisioning. again, because it is a very diverse school, and very, very rich in culture and cultural backgrounds, a lot of the folks who actually did this exercise with us, the parents and the community members who did this exercise with us, had really spoken about the ability to use the space to share and practice culture and their rich culture, the cultures that they bring with them. So it was very exciting to see that commonality amongst the participants. So it made it very easy for us to collectively really write down what the vision of the participants is for the schoolyard. And then we collectively decided that, okay, the concept of this playground is going to be weaving cultures, a weaving of cultures. So we took that and we turned it into a symbol of weaving. And then Matteo and I, since we are architects, we translated everyone's ideas into everyone's ideas into plan, spatial plan. For example, here, this area over here, this is the back of the schoolyard. There's a zoom in area here. And this area is where most participants, while playing the game, had decided to have a space of creativity. And some people called it a maker space. Some people called it a space to be able to have outdoor classrooms. So it was very easy for us to identify that, okay, this is the space for creative activities and outdoor classrooms and a maker space. It was easy for us to identify that this is the space for most of the play equipment, and it was easy for us to identify that this is the space where a lot of the kids want a little quiet area, and then here an open space for events and so on and so forth. So we did this exercise of translating that information, and we represented this map to the community. And because we had incorporated, let's say, all the ideas and data that had come out of the process from beginning to this point in the project, it was very easy for folks to say, yes, this is exactly what we wanted in the space. This is exactly the design that we envisioned. So there was a lot of importance in really paying attention to the data that was collected, qualitative and quantitative, from A to Z in the project. And this is a little sketch now. And if you have the chance to visit South Philly and the schoolyard, it is actually implemented. So we're excited to, and here's a mural that came out of the process.
Screen share again.
I'm so sorry. Did I lose the internet again?
The screen share, yeah. Looks like.
Oh my God. Oh, yes. It is my unfortunate internet. I'm so sorry about this. Oh, it says host disabled attendees screen sharing.
Let me give you your.
And I'm going to also share this presentation with you, Patrick, just in case. I'm so sorry. I did not anticipate my internet's going to be.
You should have co-host status now to be able to share again.
Yes. Yes, I do.
And then Gamar, it looked like Kelly had a question about the cards. She asked, did they fill out the cards before the game started and then teams would choose the answers they liked the best?
Good question. We had cards that were already set. We had, since we had a lot of conversations with teachers and students and parents, etc., informally and formally, we had collected a lot of information of what they want to see in the space. So most of the answer cards were already ready cards that included the information that we had gathered from them. But also we had blank cards. We had blank cards because just in case they couldn't find an answer in the answer cards that fit well in that moment of conversation, they had the chance to write a new answer and present an answer there and then. Oh, Patrick, it still says disabled.
It shouldn't be. I didn't change anything. One participant can share at a time. Multiple.
Oh, perhaps because I'm also on my phone.
It shouldn't be because it allowed you to do it to begin with. Do you want to try again?
Yeah. Screen. Yeah, it says host disabled attendee screen sharing.
I didn't change anything. Let's see here. Advanced sharing. Yeah, it says all participants can share. Do you want to try emailing it to me? And
yes.
I apologize for the technical difficulties, folks. Does anybody have any questions while we navigate this tech issue?
Ay, ay, ay.
Welcome to Tuesday.
It's because my computer, let me try and share it maybe through my phone, because now my computer and internet's not working. I'm so sorry. This is it had been okay throughout this week. My internet, I don't know why today it has decided to work against me.
It's because you're doing a presentation, that's why.
Yeah, I think that's the reason why.
It's been great. That's really wonderful. Even just don't worry. This is really, really fascinating.
And also, I can't see the comments right now, but there was also quite a comment about projects, long-term projects. I just wanted to share that Southwark project was done over the span of 3 years, and it's still ongoing. And the snippet that I showed was done, let's say, in 4 months, but what we did is we kept doing a lot of creative activities and community engagement throughout those 3 years prior to the finishing of the implementation of the Schoolyard, is because we also do not want to lose the momentum of the project. We don't want to lose the interest of people. And it is through doing this sort of ongoing engagement that you also create a very, very solid group of community members who are really dedicated to the space. And then that creates ownership. And at the same time, you know, they're always going to show up. They're always going to care for the space. So there's the importance of doing that. And again, I think the project wouldn't have been successful had it not been for the persistence and a lot of logistics and hard admin work by Shari Hirsch and the Restore Spaces Initiative. Because now I'm only showing, let's say, the game and, you know, all the fun activities, but there's a lot of hard work that also goes into building projects like this.
I still don't have the presentation in my inbox yet.
Because I am also having trouble sharing it with you. But I am so close to doing it. I'm doing it on my phone, so you'll hopefully get it in.
I have a question for you. So
yes,
with either the potato supply chain or even the park design project, what is your process for narrowing in on what are the right questions to ask?
Right. So that's a great question, because what we do, okay, immersing ourselves in the context is. By the way, I shared. You should get the presentation now. Patrick, I shared it. So the reason why I immersed myself in the context prior to beginning any project is to have very, very informal conversations with folks. And I take a lot of notes from that perspective. And what I do is I'm also a very observant person. Sometimes I just sit in the corner and observe a day passing by. Let's say in the context of the market, I would just sit there, have my food during lunchtime, and then just observe movement, observe sound, things that are happening in the context. And then I would do a walkthrough. For example, the way I decided to hone down on the potato and to really follow the potato and ask questions about the supply and value chain of the potato were many things. Because first and foremost, the potato was the largest space occupying in the market. So it had a really significant presence. And then as I was talking to the folks there and the vendors of the potato, they started talking about the richness of the potato in that context. I learned that the potato comes from the Andes. It's indigenous to the Andes. And it's true that I only was seeing 5 different species of potatoes being sold in the market, but there were stories and histories about thousands and thousands of different species that one can grow, and the indigenous population had been growing for hundreds of years in that context. So I was like, wait a second, that's a great insight. That is a wonderful thing to dig into, because my intention was to dig into really hidden things that we don't necessarily see anymore in this like hyper-capitalist society of ours and hyper-capitalist economy of ours, because what they're great at doing is erasing culture, erasing history, erasing species, biodiversity. So I guess that moment of really sitting there and realizing that the potato is my entry point, I just realized that because I spend a lot of time there. And I don't know, Patrick, if that answers your question when it comes to the potato.
Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Am I on the right slide?
Yes, that is the translation of our sketches to the actual design of the schoolyard. So if you go to the next slide. And the next. You see the mural, because when you're working with mural arts, one of the components of the project should be an actual mural. So this mural, remember when I was talking about the vision and the concept of the schoolyard that came out of all our participatory research that we did, and it was about weaving cultures or weaving cultures together. James Dunn, the muralist who worked on this mural with the students of the Southeast by Southeast and some of the students from the neighborhood, they took this concept and they really dove into it, and then they looked into different weaving patterns of all the different cultures that came from the school, from the community that within the school and around the school. So you see a lot of like weaving patterns from Guatemala, from Mexico, from Middle East, even though they seem very simple patterns, but and it is reflective of the different cultures that exist in the school. And then you also see some birds. Now you can't see it, but in the middle section there, in light blue, there are different birds in the middle, but that is also a reflection of the birds that come from the different countries that the school represents. So in fact, this concept and vision was the driving force of how to design everything when it came to the school, the front yard, the murals across the school, around the school, and the playground itself. So it's very important to do that sort of research and parts and workshops like visioning sessions and postcards from the future. So that's Southwark project. And then the last project actually is a tiny, a little snippet of a project that we're currently working on. Patrick, if you click next, thank you. I just want to share with you a site analysis that we did a few months back with 8th graders and 5th graders, because when the school district saw our project at the Southwark, they were really, really excited about how well we were able to successfully and collectively conduct participatory research and design in Southwark. So they asked us to work on 3 more schools. So this is a site analysis that we did with 8th graders and 5th graders, and I decided to do it through the lens of the camera. I love photography and filmmaking, and as you know, I studied filmmaking, and I really believe in the strength of visual communication. So what we did is, if you click next, Patrick. So I don't know why systems mapping is highlighted. In this case, it's mapping, visual storytelling, and photography. So what we did is we, in this case, this is Sparrow School. This is the work of 8th graders. It was a very, very simple exercise. Prior to giving the kids a Polaroid camera, I asked them to think about what is their favorite spot in the schoolyard and what is their least favorite spot in the schoolyard. Or just a spot where they thought, they had something to say about. So they took a moment, they thought about it, and then we distributed Polaroid cameras, and then we went down to the schoolyard. And it was so exciting to see these kids really going to the corners that they thought of and snap a picture. And they had to think really wisely what picture to take, because they had to take only one picture. We had enough Polaroid, film for just one picture per student. So it was really exciting for them to really think, okay, which is the corner I like the least or like the most. So they took these pictures and we went back to the classroom, and then it wasn't enough for the kids to take pictures. They had to have a story behind it. So, okay, they took the pictures. We came back to the classroom. They pinned the picture on the plan, where they took the picture on the plan. And then each student, as they were pinning their picture on the corresponding plan, they had to tell the story of why they took this picture. And this is when Shari and I were taking notes like crazy about really the fun, exciting, really clever things kids were saying. And one of my favorites in the case of this school was at the very top, central space. This is a huge schoolyard, and there's no shade whatsoever, and it's hot like crazy, and the kids are running around everywhere. And one of the kids took a picture of that huge spot under the sun, and he said, this feels like Black Friday. It's so annoying and so hot, and it's so full of kids. It's crazy. I hate going there. And we just started laughing at it. And, taking notes of these moments and these quotes is very, very important, because at the end of the day, it gives you a vocabulary to describe the project at the very end. And another favorite of mine in this case is the left side of the schoolyard at the edge, at the fence. A lot of girls like to hang out there, and it's their cool space. It's a space where they share memories, and the way they were describing these spaces was really, really fantastic. And it really gave us as designers an idea as to how the space is being used, and what is it that they cherish in the space, and what it is that we don't necessarily, we have to make sure that we don't erase as an experience for the kids. Another thing was Trashnado, which is a tornado full of trash at the entrance of the school. It's interesting because the kids called it, oh, you know, this is where the trash NATO is, and we don't like hanging out there. But these are like environmental insights that the kids are giving us during this site analysis. So it was really exciting. And if you click next, Patrick, there's the other school, which is very similar. You see, with the number of pictures in this plan, you would realize that the schoolyard is much smaller than the other one because of how overlapped the pictures are. But one of my favorites in this particular, and these are done with 5th graders. The prior one was 8th graders. On the top right corner, there's a beautiful picture and the quote from a student that said, you know, this is a very emotional spot for me. This is where I feel calm and relaxed, and this is where I see nature. Because again, these schoolyards are so barren, full of like hot concrete and asphalt, that they barely have any life in there. But it's very interesting how students find life in those instances. And it was one of the points from which you could at least see a little bit of nature looking out of the school and not in. And then another one was at the bottom, where a few students actually took a photo of that space and said, you know what, this is a place where a lot of creativity happens in the schoolyard, and we would like to maintain it as such. We want to have it as a space where we can dance, sing, have our creative activities. So again, it's a very beautiful way of for the students to really talk about the space without even calling it site analysis, because in our field of design and landscape architecture, when you call site analysis, it becomes very technical. You know, you take measurements, etc. You see the conditions of the space in a very technical way. So this was a really super fun way of doing site analysis that really is not conventional. And when you introduce an exercise like this to kids, or even to grown-ups, you know, we forget that we are doing site analysis. It is a creative activity that we are doing. And the next slide is just a little bit of the literature behind this, which I thought I'd share also. It talks about how you perceive kids as children and youth as co-researchers rather than subjects of study. And you have to really believe in the fact that the kids have the ability to decide for themselves where to go with the camera, and the idea behind pairing these pictures with a story is because the story or the visual image in itself can be very ambiguous. So you have to pair it with the narrative and let the children talk about their photos and what the subjective meaning is behind these photos. So it's part of the meaning making of the process. And we are still, you know, working on this project, but I thought, again, just to share this particular exercise with you. And again, none of these projects would be possible had it not been for Shari and the Restore Spaces Initiative and the whole team, in fact, and the leaderships of these schools that we are working with, the school district, the partner organizations. So when I present these, I'm not presenting them as something I alone did, but we do collectively. And that was my last slide. And the last slide says thank you. So I can share with you as a video on my phone, and I can answer any of the questions that anyone has.
I'll ask a question. With the work that you do, I mean, it's a really beautiful process, and I love especially what initially connected me to you was seeing the game that you designed for how to design the school's spaces. Do you actually see the information being used in a way that it's intended to be used by in that case, the school, or in any other situation? Do you see the information just kind of sitting on a shelf or actually being implemented to lead to investments and design?
You mean in the context of Southwark or in different contexts? If I were to take this game somewhere else?
Well, specifically, let's say that one in particular, but I'm saying, so I think one of the things that happens a lot in our community, and other communities that I've lived in as well, is we will do all the work to collect data, but
Mm-hmm.
then we never actually do anything with the data after it's been collected. And I
Right.
think here in Erie, that has led to a lot of frustrations because people tend to get like survey fatigue because they're asked so many things, but they never
Right.
actually see change develop as a result of the answers that they provide. So in the situation with, say, that school where you developed the game, was this space inevitably designed to reflect the desires of the students and the parents and the adjacent communities?
Absolutely. Not absolutely. And in fact, the project's implemented. The garden is built already. Based off of all the data that came out of the creative workshops and the gameplay that we did at Southwark. And what actually asserts that, or affirms that, I would say, is the fact that when we took all this information and we put it in Excel sheets, and we do, we try to make sense out of the information that's in there, and we also overlapped it and translated it into a spatial map. What happened is that when we synthesized all this information in a format of a presentation, we always make sure we go back to the community, we represent this information to them, and we make sure that all their information and all the data that we had gathered and all their reflections and ideas are in the work that we are doing, or the designs that we are creating. And when we presented the sketch of the map or the design of the Southwark as a result of the gameplay, everybody looked at it and everybody was like, this is exactly what we were asking for. This is exactly what we wanted. And we were expressing throughout when we played the game, when we were doing the other exercises, and so on and so forth. So we didn't, as designers, we didn't even have to do many versions of the design. This version has 5 ideas, this version has the other 5 ideas that from the community. In fact, the plan itself has every single idea that came out of all the single activities and gameplay that we did, and it is implemented and it's built. And I haven't had the chance to see the garden grow because of COVID, but I can't wait to go back and see how the garden's living. And right now we are working on building stewardship and ownership and maintenance of the space, so that it really becomes the space of the community who helped us design the space. And when the school district saw this process, this is when they called Mural Arts again and said, listen, this was a wonderful process and of engagement. Let's just go forward with 2-3 other schools. And honestly, we were very meticulous in the way we were documenting this information, and we were documenting it with a purpose. We weren't documenting just for the sake of documentation. We were documenting for the purpose of designing. We were documenting for the purpose of maybe envisioning something in the future that's going to happen in the space. And what I shared with you was only 4 months of the process. So imagine within the remaining 2.5 years, a lot of other things have happened. So we always come back to these presentations and these games and these this data to think what future activities can happen in the space.
Jeff put a question in the chat box about, do you find, it was what, about incentivizing people encountering a need to incentivize respondents beyond their willingness to help in their own, beyond their willingness to help?
Could you repeat the question? I'm so sorry.
Oh, Jeff had a question. It was, have you ever encountered any need to incentivize respondents? Like, do you give them a gift card or something if they, is that something that you've felt the need to do, or?
That is yeah, that is a great question, because again, I credit this to Shari and not to me. But the idea is, after doing these exercises and finding that there's a core group of folks who always show up to these meetings, Shari introduced something called the community design leaders. The community design leaders become co-planners and co-designers with us as a team, and then obviously their work is also compensated. We pay, or Shari pays whoever is an actual team member in the project. So that is an incentive. So it becomes work, let's say. So, you know, we're not the only ones getting paid doing this work, but community members are first and foremost the most important people who have to be at the forefront of designing their own spaces and letting us know what are the issues that, you know, or what different types of change that they want to make in their neighborhoods. And in order to do that, yeah, Shari and Restore Spaces actually pays community design leaders. Sometimes we have 10, 12 community design leaders who are really part of the project. And then some of them really become leaders. It's really exciting to see how community members really take leadership roles, and they become the voice of the community and the ones who represent the community. So that's, and another way of sort of incentivizing is, let's say when we talk about these projects, we never present these projects alone. And one of the reasons I feel weird today, although I wanted to present other stuff that I've personally worked on, but one of the things we do when we go to symposiums and presentations, community members who worked on this are always with us. We present this collectively. We never present this as an individual. So, and their names are always there as part of the artistic team. And currently we're writing a case study about these projects, or different case studies about these projects. And again, they're always cited as team member and artists on the project, and not, you know, somebody who just showed up to, you know, participate.
Kelly, do you have any questions?
I don't know, a lot to think over. I mean, I think it is here it's about more, I think about it as it's more than it's really about planning process, about a collaborative planning process, and how do you get information from people. And I suppose a survey is one way to do it, but if you're but that's a pretty shallow way to do that. So but I think about, well, what, you know, how can this apply? I think about it in terms of doing an artist residency, for example, school-based residency, and how to incorporate formal evaluation into the design of the residency, in terms of what are kids learning, how are we documenting what they're learning, how are we handing that over to them also, in terms of what they want to share and what they want to do. And so I don't have any questions. The wheels are turning, that's all.
So even though I didn't share this, but in the recent project, the project were about creating learning landscapes in the schoolyards. And one of the things that really came out of the process, and the words that I shared with you from the site analysis, we worked with 2 different storytellers, and these storytellers took all this information and created 2 very beautiful stories of this imagined space. And for it to become, I would say, like the official rhyme or story of the schoolyard, and it rhymes so beautifully, and it's so catchy, the stories, that the kids it sticks in the kid's head and they can repeat it very easily. They can become people who tell the story of their space and the process and the schoolyard that they imagine. So that's one way of, I guess, transferring this information so that it becomes part of a learning process for the kids, but also something that they take with them and they keep repeating and then give it to new generations that come. It doesn't, I mean, it's not necessarily directly what you were asking, but that's one way of kids learning, storytelling. Storytelling was one way. And as you know, I mean, it's very difficult to evaluate art and artistic practice. And it needs a lot of time, and you need to wait for the spaces to be used, and art. I guess the art that's being produced to be experienced for one to understand what the impact of this work has been. But what we do is we do a lot of like evaluations throughout our projects. And they're not formal evaluations. Obviously, designs and technical designs go through formal evaluation and feedback and, sessions. But we do, I guess we're also trying to figure out how we can introduce forms of evaluation throughout the process.
Here's something that very often when you get a grant, they want to see the progress made, right? That's part of the like, what are your evaluation? How do you, and some, professional evaluator folks are like, well, first of all, it's really hard to measure how people have changed, that you need to do some sort of quantitative survey at the beginning, and then you need to do another one at the end, and you have to have it, and it can't just be an aggregate of everybody doing it both in the beginning and end. You really have to match the same person at the beginning to the same person at the end, and then you can begin to measure this sort of change in the scientific way. And you didn't really talk about anything like that. Is that something that you've ever tackled, or is that of any interest? Or
I don't know if I should say thankfully I've never had to do that. Not because what we do is we always make sure that we document this in a way that we can turn it into a presentation, the presentation of our process. And throughout that presentation, we also include a lot of quotes and testimonials from people about how they have changed, how their perception of the space has changed, how this process has changed them, and then has given them, let's say, leadership skills, and for them to always constantly show up. So a lot of this is already, so when we put it in a presentation format like that, that has been enough for now to show that the project has been a success in the way we've approached it. And so we have never had the need to do that sort of technical, let's say, survey at beginning and end, and having to match it. Yeah.
Kelly, I have some ideas on how that we could potentially do that with if you're thinking of youth or even adults, really, but I think it'd probably resonate more with youth. I think about how a lot of role-playing games that youth play, or things like Pokemon, are always about leveling up. And if you gain new skills and you play long enough, then you have new points, and you can use those points to level up. And then typically there's cards associated with, if you're looking at a player or a character, it'll say what their speed is, what their agility is, what their critical thinking might be. So I think that there's a possibility that we could work to assess progress over a course of a residency by doing something like having them make their own cards, where maybe at the start of the residency, they only have 20 points, and they have to distribute those 20 points across those skill sets that you're trying to teach through your residency. And then maybe at the halfway point, you say, okay, because you've been given all of this new information and knowledge and you've been implementing it, you now have 35 points, and you have to distribute these 35 points across these skill sets. And then as you move through the residency, you keep providing more points to distribute amongst those specific skill sets, so that when you're providing information to the grant maker, you can say, okay, when this person started this residency, this is how they defined their skills. And then here is how they progressed over that to when we were at the end. This is how they defined it.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. I know one thing that I really that there's a huge weakness in the pre and post survey is that it sort of assumes that people are, and I'm thinking about this in terms of especially rating teachers who teachers' growth over a course of a project, is that when they take the pre-survey, it sort of assumes that they're able to assess their own level, and like, so I had a thing where we had teachers were like, how comfortable are you teaching multicultural curriculum? And they're like scored themselves really high, and then at the end of the project they actually scored themselves lower. So if you looked at it, it looks like they'd actually lost skills, but actually I think what happened is they gained this awareness that they didn't know what they were doing as much as they thought they did in the beginning. And now they have a much richer and more nuanced idea and are a little more humble about it. So, but you can't really capture that in the quantitative survey, or maybe I'm just don't know how to write them right yet, but I don't need to monopolize all this on my end of things. I know Jeff has been hanging in there.
Just maybe to quickly respond to that, Kelly, I guess since I don't know the context of the project you just described, a lot of initial conversations with teachers is very important. Even if you go in with a very simple icebreaker exercise about what skills are, or
right.
And also to Patrick's point, where saying keeping track doesn't necessarily have to be in a survey format, but it can be in a journaling format, or that the game cards format, and every time you go in with a certain icebreaker. And I guess defining the definition of words and terminologies is also helpful, like assessment, or what are you trying to assess and why, and how can one grow. Again, I don't know the specifics of the project, but little icebreaker exercises.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I would much rather do that and play games with people than do a survey.
Yeah.
If we don't have any other questions this evening, I think we'll go ahead and end this session. As I mentioned, this session will be is recorded, and it'll be posted to Erie Arts and Culture's blog. And we'll also post your presentation as a downloadable format to accompany that, just for some of those areas that we had some loading issues. But again, I want to thank you for your time this evening, Gamar, and sharing all of your knowledge and expertise and experience with us. I also want to thank everybody that's joined us this evening. Again, the Erie Arts and Cultures Pro Network is funded in part by the National Endowments for the Arts through their Artworks program. Gamar, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you for having me, and I hope this was helpful.
Yeah, very much so. So everybody have a good evening.
You too. Bye-bye.